So tell me, do you recognize this tune? Or how about this one? Depending on where you are from, you would probably recognize these tunes to be the theme song of an adaptation of the classical Chinese literature Journey to the West. The Chinese production was better recognized in Chinese-speaking territories and Southeast Asia, while the Japanese production was better known in Japan and the West. In this story, the Buddhist monk Tang Xuanzang, who is often translated as Tripitaka, was accompanied by his three magical disciples, Sun Wukong, Monkey, Zhu Ba Jie, Pixie, and Sa Wu Jing, Sandy, to go to India to collect Buddhist scriptures to bring back to China. In most adaptations, Sanzang was depicted as cowardly, effeminate, and useless without his disciples. But in the real world, Xuanzang was actually a bit of a badass. He was a strong, independent monk, darn it! He needed no help from no magic monkey. Tang Xuanzang was based on a real person, and he did go to India. So in this episode, we are going to talk about the real Xuanzang and follow along with him on a virtual tour across Central Asia to India. Xuanzang was born sometime in the early 600s. His original name was Chen Yi. Xuanzang was the name he adopted when he became a Buddhist monk, and Sanzang was a name he received later in life for his accomplishments. But in the novel, he received the name relatively early in his life, after assisting Emperor Tang Taizong solve a problem. So, to differentiate the real version to the fictional one, I will refer to the historical person as Xuanzang. Unlike the fictional version of him, where he was floated down a river due to family drama, the real Xuanzang actually had a relatively normal upbringing, despite him being a bit of a boy wonder. He was the fourth son in a family with a long line of scholarly tradition, and even at a very young age, he had already displayed a lot of his intellectual prowess and affinity for learning. He became a Buddhist monk not because he was discovered by monks by the riverside, like in the Journey to the West story. He was just invited into a monastery by his second brother, who was already a monk. At the tender age of 13, he once again displayed his intellectual prowess by being able to memorize all the contents of a book or a Buddhist sutra by the second reading. The idyllic life of this bookworm, however, did not last long. The Sui dynasty was collapsing, and a series of rebellions that would eventually lead to the establishment of the Tang dynasty ravaged the land. So he had already seen plenty of famine, war, and death in his youth. Yet, he persisted in spreading the wisdom of Buddha and gained quite a bit of renown through his lectures while he was a refugee. So Xuanzang was already a minor celebrity in China before he went to India. The reason why he decided to go wasn't because the goddess Guan Yin ordered him to go fetch scriptures in India. It was because he was a complete nerd, and he was perplexed by how the various Buddhist sutras contradict each other. So to get to the bottom of this, he decided for himself that he needed to go west to India, the land of Buddhism's origin, to discover the truth. In the novel, he would face various demons, trials, and obstacles. In the real world, he would also face many tough challenges, and the first one he had to face was the amorphous nightmare called bureaucracy. He couldn't leave China at the time because Tang Dynasty China was fighting a war against the Eastern Turkic Khaganate. So everyone who tried to leave the empire would be treated like a spy. So he had to do it on the hush. But he can't really do that. And here is the reason why. At the time, there were two main routes to India, one by land through Central Asia and the other one by sea through Southeast Asia. It was much easier to go by land at the time because the land route follows the well-trodden path of the Silk Road, the vast ancient trading network between Asia and Europe. It was easier to find guides and trade for supplies along this route. And there are also Buddhist communities where he could receive donations from. He could also receive more funds by advertising his intention to go to India to find the truth. So that's why his plans were found out pretty quickly. And he had to play a dangerous game of hide and seek with the authorities while he was in China. Luckily for him, he was like the ancient Chinese Forrest Gump. Wherever he went, people would be so inspired by his audacious plan to go to the West, they would go to great lengths to assist him. When he arrived at Yumen, the final gate that separated traditional China from the wild West, the guard not only let him through, he even provided him with supplies and escorted him for miles. To the west of the pass is the Taklamakan Desert, infamous for its harsh, arid environment, yet there are still settlements there that thrive, as they were sustained by oases and underground water supplies. Even so, travel was still very difficult, because unlike the novels, Xuanzang hasn't got a magic monkey with him. And he almost died of thirst a few times. Still, he persisted, and eventually he came across the sandstone hills of the Flaming Mountains. This location is the backdrop for an epic set piece in the Journey to the West novel, where Sun Wukong fought the Bull Demon King. Even without the magical duel, this natural phenomenon was still quite a sight to behold back then. Today, though, it's become a tourist trap, with tacky Sun Wukong performance every day. When the historical Xuanzang came through here, he also faced a trial, albeit a less violent one. The king of Gaochang, who ruled the region near Turpan today, was so enamored by his lectures, he showered Xuanzang with privileges and begged him to stay as the religious leader of his kingdom. But Xuanzang's mind was set on going to India to find the truth. So he had to go on a hunger strike to threaten the king to let him go. Distraught by Xuanzang's withering health, the king had no choice but to relent, on the condition that Xuanzang would stay in his kingdom for 3 years upon his return. To seal the deal, they swore an oath of brotherhood. This episode actually provided Xuanzang with a powerful patron that made his future travels much easier. He was given enough horses, servants, and supplies to last for 20 years worth of journey. Most importantly, he was also given a letter of recommendation that gained him audience to various rulers, such as the Khan of the Western Turkic Khaganate. Departing from the hellish heat of the Taklamakan Desert, passing through the icy peaks of Tianshan Mountains, he arrived at the verdant grassland of the Khaganate's capital, Suyab, which is near Tokmok, Kyrgyzstan today. Over there, he saw deers adorned with bells and rings, signifying that they belong to the Khan and should not be hunted. Later on, Xuanzang was honored with a feast. The Khan at the time was a devotee of Zoroastrianism, the ancient Persian religion that worshipped the everlasting flame. So they didn't sit on wooden chairs, which they believed to contain fire. They also drink grape wine here, which was quite rare for the Chinese, who usually drink grain-based wine such as rice wine. The Turks showed a lot of hospitality to Xuanzang, but the monk wasn't impressed by their freewheeling and free-drinking excess. So Xuanzang lectured them on his religious doctrine when he found the chance. Once again, another ruler was enamored by his teaching. The Khan tried to make him stay and also failed. Nevertheless, he provided the monk with more resources to continue his journey. In the novel Journey to the West, he was perpetually hounded by monsters that wanted to eat his flesh and gain immortality. So the courteous treatment he received everywhere was quite a major departure from the story. Still, not all his encounters were so happy-go-lucky. In Samarkand, he wasn't welcomed by the population who were devotees of Manichaeanism. Some of his followers were almost set on fire. But he was able to convert the king and set up a convent. This is practically the pattern that will keep repeating itself. Xuanzang didn't need any magical monkey. His silver tongue was quite magical by itself. Some of the brigands he met on the journey were even persuaded to mend their evil ways. But of course, since this information comes from his biography, it may be slightly embellished, because historically, there wasn't a major shift in religion in Samarkand. However, Manichaeism is a syncretic religion that combines the elements of Zoroastrianism, Christianity, and Buddhism. So, they may have mistook Xuanzang's preaching to be the doctrines of Manichaeism. This is just my speculation though. On the other hand, his accounts on Buddhist-related matters in India is highly precise and have proven to be invaluable historical resource for generations of historians. Anyway, Xuanzang's journey took him across some of the most magnificent sites of the ancient world, which we can no longer see today. On his journey to Balkh, he saw the legendary Iron Gate, which stood in the steep pass of a region that is Uzbekistan today. In Bamiyan, which is Afghanistan today, he saw the giant Buddhas, which unfortunately had been destroyed in 2001. Finally, Xuanzang reached Gandhara, which is located in Peshawar Basin today, Pakistan. This place had storied history, and its ownership went through a lot of hands. It was featured in the Vedas, conquered by Alexander the Great, became part of the Mauryan Empire, Kushan Empire, and so on. When Xuanzang arrived, he saw a lot of Buddhist stupas and statues. The statues in this region looked quite unique, as they were carved in the Greco-Buddhist style. You can see how they resemble some Greek statues. For Xuanzang, it looked like he was in the right place. As the ending of the Monkey TV series goes, the place of light, Gandhara, was the final destination. This is also where the story wraps up in the novel. But for the historical Xuanzang, this is actually just the start of his adventure in India, because he discovered that the once great community of monks is no longer here. To find the answers to his questions, he had to press on into the land of millions of gods. After the fall of the Great Gupta Empire, India at the time of Xuanzang's visit had been divided into many smaller states, with the largest one being the Harsha Empire, led by the powerful Emperor Harsha, who had built a cosmopolitan and religiously tolerant empire. Within this empire stood what was perhaps the greatest educational institute of the world of that time period, Nalanda Mahavira. Xuanzang had a date with destiny at this place, but it is going to take a while for him to get here. Why? Because he just can't stop meandering and fawning over every single Buddhist statues and stupas he came across. He was like a weeb in otaku heaven. He was so obsessive-compulsive, he wrote insanely detailed accounts of the villages and temples he came across. He would describe the height of each statue, how many paces it takes to get from one statue to the next stupa, and the distance and direction to the next village. So he virtually created a near photo-perfect snapshot of India of this time period. Archaeologists in the future would even rely on his accounts to make some major discoveries. Xuanzang was also the first one to bring the name of India, Indu, to China. Before this, India was called Sendu, after the area of Sindh, which was discovered by Zhang Qian in 2nd century BCE. After that, it was called Tianzu, and finally, Xuanzang called it Indu, which is the name used for India by China until today. But of course, Indians have different names for their own country. Bharat. India is the English name used by modern India. Indians themselves, however, call their own country Bharat Ganaraja. The name Bharat have disputed origins. One popular explanation is that it was derived from the name of the common ancestors of the Pandavas and Kauravas, the two warring factions of the Indian epic Mahabharata. Anyway, as Xuanzang was taking his time on his merry tour, the High Abbot of Nalanda, Silabhadra, was waiting impatiently for the Chinese monk to come. "Oh, where is that whippersnapper?" Silabhadra was already over 100 years old at the time. He had been suffering from colic for over 20 years. And 3 years ago, the pain had become so unbearable, he tried to commit suicide by starving himself to death. But then one day, he received a revelation. In his dream, he was visited by 3 bright shining figures. The gold-colored one was Manjusri, the most senior bodhisattva. The crystal one was Avalokitesvara, the bodhisattva of compassion, which will come to be known as Guanyin in China. And the silver one was Maitreya, the future Buddha. They told him that he was an evil king in his past, and to atone for his karmic sins, he had to spread the teachings of Buddha abroad, and he could do so by transmitting his knowledge to a Chinese monk. After having this dream, his pain miraculously disappeared, and ever since then, he had been waiting for the Chinese monk to come. So, where is this Chinese monk anyway? Xuanzang was occupied, captured to be precise, by a band of pirates who wanted to sacrifice him to the goddess of war, Durga. Ah yes, a familiar scene to the novel. It is likely that this episode in his travel became a major inspiration for the novel. Interestingly, Durga was also known to be the vanquisher of Mahisasura, the buffalo demon, the latter of which might be the inspiration for a major antagonist from the novel, the Bull Demon King. Anyways, Xuanzang got lucky. A sudden turn of the weather scared the pirates, and he used the opportunity to convince them to repent their evil ways. Durga is a Hindu goddess, but the thing about Hinduism is that it is not a monolithic religion. In India, they actually call it Sanatana Dharma. It is a term used for a collection of beliefs with many different sects and modes of worship. So, the human sacrifice practiced by one group of Durga worshippers might absolutely horrify the next group of Durga worshippers. In a way, it is similar to how religious Taoism is practiced in China. Not long after that incident, Xuanzang finally reached Nalanda. Upon seeing Xuanzang, Silabhadra immediately felt a special bond with him. He is the one! So Xuanzang was given a position in this prestigious university and the best education. But being ever adventurous, he didn't stay for too long. Oh, don't worry, he will come back to do something important. But for now, adventure beckons. And he went off to visit every single corner of India. Or to be precise, the Buddhist monasteries and holy places. Because if you haven't already figured it out, he is really into Buddhism. When he reached the Gujarat region, he recorded reports of faraway countries that lied further west. Persia, which at the time was ruled by the Sassanid dynasty. To the northwest was a place called Folin, and to the southwest there was a peculiar country which was populated and ruled completely by women. Since Xuanzang received this information secondhand, the location he received might be slightly off. In the northwest of the Sasanian Empire, on the southern coast of the Black Sea, actually lies the mythical capital of the Amazon, Themyscira, as claimed by Herodotus. This place is just part of a myth, of course, and it probably means that Xuanzang received a slightly distorted information. Yet, this means that it was the Amazons themselves that inspired the women's kingdom in the novel. You know, I think it would be really cool if Wonder Woman had a crossover with Sun Wukong, if DC would allow it. Not long after, Xuanzang experienced a nightmare. He dreamt that a catastrophe had befallen Nalanda, so he quickly returned to the Mahavira. Luckily, Nalanda was safe and sound. For now. But soon, it faced a great challenge from another branch of Buddhist school, the Theravada. There are two major branches of Buddhism. Mahayana, which Xuanzang adheres to and is prevalent in China, Korea, Japan, and Vietnam today, and Theravada Buddhism, which is prevalent in Sri Lanka and various Southeast Asian countries. Mahayana is often called the Great Vehicle, as it is intended to appeal to the masses. Yet, it is often seen as being too preoccupied with idol worship by the Theravada Buddhists. Theravada, on the other hand, focuses on personal enlightenment, and it is often seen as selfish by the Mahayana Buddhists. Emperor Harsha had been challenged by a sect of Theravada Buddhists who denigrated the Institute of Nalanda, the pride of his empire. So, to defend his honor, he arranged to have 4 monks from Nalanda to debate the merits of their sect. And as you would have guessed it, Xuanzang was chosen to be one of Nalanda's representative. It was a great honor for him. He humbly said that even though he was of meager ability, he will do his darnest to defend the reputation of all monks in China. So, before the contest, Harsha summoned Xuanzang as he was fascinated by this monk from China. As a warrior emperor himself, he was curious about the emperor of Tang Dynasty China and asked Xuanzang many questions about his home country. After that, he asked about the treatise on Mahayana Buddhism that he wrote. Apparently, it was really good, so he upscaled the debate. He invited 3,000 priests from 18 kingdoms into his empire and made Xuanzang lead the assembly. Oh, now you're expecting a massive brawl of wits and rhetorics here. But all we've got was a major anticlimax. The moment Xuanzang opened the floor with his treatise and challenged anyone to debunk it, the debate was shut down right from the start. For 18 days and nights, they waited for even a single challenger to come. Alas, no one dared to step forward. By the end of the assembly, Xuanzang was crowned as Mahayana Deva. Thus, he returned home to China triumphant. The journey home was relatively smooth, besides the fact that some bandits chased his elephants into a river and drenched his cargo of Buddhist scriptures and statues. And this became another incident that inspired a scene in the novel. Upon his return, he was welcomed by Emperor Tang Taizong himself. His crime of leaving the country was forgiven, and he was given much privilege and spent the rest of his life translating Buddhist sutras and wrote about the details of his travels. Xuanzang was neither the first nor the last Buddhist traveler from East Asia that visited India. Over the millennia, Indian influence brought in via Buddhism influenced the development of religious institutions in China. Facing the competition from Buddhism, Taoism started to organize itself too. Indian myths and legends also strongly influenced the literary imagination of the Chinese. The Monkey King Sun Wukong looks like it was directly inspired by the Indian monkey god Hanuman. In fact, all of the 4 great Chinese literature, Romance of the Three Kingdoms, Outlaws of the Marsh, Journey to the West, and Dream of the Red Chamber all had Buddhist themes. China owed a great debt to India for enriching its spiritual and literary landscape, and this debt was partially paid back by the precious account of the time period left by Xuanzang. His name would be cited in almost every history books on India concerning this time period, and his greatly detailed accounts had made possible the reconstruction of the Nalanda temple in India after the mass decline of Buddhism in the 12th century. In fact, there is a Xuanzang Memorial Hall at the rebuilt Nalanda today. This is why it is important to learn about the history of other countries. You can better understand your own history by seeing it through another pair of eyes. Some of China's lost history is preserved in other countries such as Japan, which preserved the play Prince of Lanling. In Korea, the scholar Sin Suk-yu's book on the pronunciation of Ming Dynasty Mandarin also provided a valuable resource in understanding the evolution of the language. Anyway, subscribe to... wait a minute. Did I forget something? Oh yeah, the king of Gaochang. Apparently, Xuanzang ghosted him and never went back to spend that 3 years he promised. Oh well, too bad for him. Anyway, subscribe to the channel, like, comment, and share to get more videos from us. Until next time, stay cool, my bros.